Not be afraid, little flock, for it is your Father's good pleasure to give you the kingdom. Sell your possessions and give alms. Make purses for yourselves that do not wear out, an unfailing treasure in heaven, where no thief comes near and no moth destroys. For where your treasure is, there your heart will also be. Be dressed for action and have your lamps lit. Be like those who are waiting for their master to return from the wedding banquet, so that they may open the door for him as soon as he comes and knocks. Blessed are those slaves whom the master finds alert when he comes. Truly, I tell you, he will fasten his belt and have them sit down to eat, and he will come and serve them. And if he comes during the middle of the night or near dawn and finds them so, blessed are those slaves. But know this, if the owner of the house had known at what hour the thief was coming, he would not have let his house be broken into. You also must be ready, for the Son of Man is coming at an unexpected hour. Friends, this is the word of the Lord. If someone were to have asked a Jew who was living at the time that the Gospel of Luke was written, "Do you believe in the coming of the Son of Man?" the response would have been very uniform. What do you think the response would have been? That's not rhetorical. Okay, maybe for 8:30 it's rhetorical. Do you believe in the coming of the Son of Man? Someone would have listened for that and thought, okay, yeah, they're referring to the Son of Man being the human one, and that's actually how some translators translate the Son of Man here. And therefore, it was a statement about God's continuation of the species. And they would have said, yes. Other people would have heard those words, Son of Man, and had the picture that was originally painted in the book of Daniel of this massively powerful man coming on the clouds of heaven, preparing to stamp out all evil and to render the kingdom almost immediately. And they would have said, yes, they believe in the coming of the Son of Man. Everyone will have answered that question. If you were a Jew, yes. How very unlike our present day. The Minnesota Multiphasic Personality Inventory, that's a lengthy name for a rather lengthy test. It's a little bit close to 75 years old right now, but it's still being used. Still being used in lots of personality tests in mental health facilities. And when I went to seminary, I had to take the multiphasic. I guess they were concerned that there might be crazies who want to go to seminary, and they'd have to weed it out. Well, one of the questions, to get to the point, one of the questions the multiphasic asks is, do you believe in the second coming? Well, I've since learned from the time I took the test that the assumed normal answer is no. The assumed normal answer is no. And when I think about it, that probably says more about our culture than it does about those who answer yes. Our culture is always kind of nudging and winking and saying, those people, they're just kind of superstitious and maybe a little bit crazy to actually believe in the second coming. But our passage today deals with it. It talks about the sudden arrival of a master and what's going on within that master's household. And then Jesus talks all of a sudden about a burglary in the middle of the night that is very sudden. And how do you put those two things together? I'll do my best. The first thing that strikes me is we're dealing with an issue of suddenness. The master arrived suddenly. There was no appointed time. It's a little bit like people who show up and the babysitter has had her boyfriend come over and boom, the parents are back. And there's a suddenness to that. There's a suddenness as well to the thief in the night. The burglary takes place in an unexpected way, and it's sudden. Surprise! The classroom teacher is going to be evaluated today. Surprise! The controller of a corporate division, the internal auditor is showing up. Surprise! The restaurateur is getting paid a surprise visit from the health department. Do you know what I'm talking about? There's a suddenness to things that happen in our lives. And whether we're prepared or not is a big question. So, how do we face the things that are unexpected? When the unexpected hits us, particularly if it's a troublesome unexpected, how do you face that? Do you just sort of freak out and let someone help you? Do you just stand very stoically and try to see your way through it? Scott Peck, who is the psychiatrist I quoted from a couple of weeks ago, commented that all human dysfunction flows from an inability to face trouble. And I thought, wow, all human dysfunction flows from an inability to face trouble. And so you know what we do? To protect against such trouble, many among us use a drug. Oh, I got everybody's attention. Use a drug, and I'm not talking about something you buy over the counter, and I'm not talking about something that's illegal. I'm talking about the drug that is called worry, anxiety. Because if we worry enough about it, there's this kind of mystical feeling that somehow it's going to go away. That when it comes, we're going to be ready because we've been worrying about it. But Jesus explains to his people, you don't need to worry about that. Don't sweat it. Sell your possessions and give alms. You know what? I don't think he really meant sell all your possessions. I think he had a smile on his face when he said it. It should not worry you. That brings me around to the second thing that emerges in these two illustrations by Jesus, and that is to be ready. This is not a Boy Scout manual for Christians. Be ready. When the Hebrews celebrate Passover, when any Jew today celebrates Passover, there is an empty seat there, right? Who's that for? Very good, very good. Elijah. That seat is for Elijah, whom they expect to come. And they're ready. It's sitting right there at the same Passover table as everybody else. They're ready. Last week I had a wonderful blessing to have been an adult participant at Synod Youth Workshop. It was the first time I've ever gone to that. And it was fantastic. Right, Lauren? Fantastic experience. There was high energy. There were wonderful leadership skills that were in evidence among the youth because it is a youth-led operation. I learned quite a lot there, and not the least of which was the discovery of the true multitasking ability of youth. The University of Tulsa experiences the same phenomenon that lots of college campuses have, or at least they've had over the last 3 weeks, and that is there's an abundance of Pokemons there. If you don't know what I'm talking about, you can forget this part of the sermon. Pokemon Go watchers seem to be absolutely everywhere. And when you've got a huge company of youth in one place, you can only imagine where everyone's looking. They're looking for Pokemons, and they appear quite often. And Pokemons appear more often where cell phones are. And where do you think cell phones are in abundance? And far from being completely absorbed, and this is the point, far from being completely absorbed in that virtual reality, I walked along the campus with a number of youth, most of whom I knew from my small group and some of whom I knew from St. Barnabas, and they could play Pokemon and carry on an interesting conversation all at the same time. I was absolutely amazed. Whatever they were ready for, they could do. And they were ready to play Pokemon Go, and they were ready to have a conversation with a stodgy adult who happened to be walking with them. But they could do it because they were ready. Many years ago, I had a conversation with a man from this congregation who, having suffered from a fatal disease, was nearing the end of his life. And at the time of my visit, he had not taken sufficient medication to stay ahead of the pain, but he still talked very coherently to me all the while he was experiencing that pain. And what he talked about were his doubts, some of his failures, some of his fears, but his fears amounted to one thing, and that had to do with the pain. But he said, finally, I know who I have faith in, and I know He's going to be with me. Is that being ready? I would think. Alice McKenzie is a preaching teacher at Perkins School of Theology right here at SMU. And she has spoken of fear and anxiety as the thieves that break into the house and threaten to steal our faith. I thought that was a fascinating way to explain it, that fear and anxiety steal into our houses, ourselves, and take away faith. They're the drugs we use to displace our faith. They're the drugs we use to prepare ourselves for loss, and they're the very things that actually get rid of our faith. There's no formula to that. Mackenzie recounts a discussion with her doctor, himself a person of faith, who commented, "Live in the past and you'll be depressed. Live in the future and you will be anxious. Live in the present with gratitude and you will be at peace." The late Henry Nouwen went with a friend of his to see a German trapeze group called the Flying Rodleys. That's no lie, that's their name, the Flying Rodleys. And it was a breathtaking performance. He was stunned by how good these people were on the trapeze. And so his friend said, "Well, would you like to meet the troupe?" And Nouwen said, "Well, yeah, I'd love to do that." So he was able to go backstage and talk to them. And he said, "I am just so amazed at your composure and your calmness," he said to Rodley, who was the one who did all the flying. And Rodley said this, "The public might think that I am the great star of trapeze, but the real star is Joe, my catcher. The secret is that the flyer does nothing and the catcher does everything. When I fly to Joe, I have simply to stretch out my arms and hands and wait for him to catch me. The worst thing the flyer can do is to try to catch the catcher. I'm not supposed to catch Joe. It's Joe's task to catch me. And we try to catch God. We use fear. We use anxiety. We use temporary joy. Through formulas and other issues, we grasp at anything, and it's God's job to catch us. And I believe God takes it pretty seriously. That doesn't mean we're passive and we just kind of lean back and say, oh, Lord, take care of me. Here I am. We've been given responsibilities, even if they are with a kind of humorous twist. Sell your possessions. Give alms. Be active in the life of the world. God is pleased to catch us. And Jesus made that clear. Do not be afraid, little flock, for it is the Father's good pleasure to give you the kingdom. Amen.